Hey everybody, it's John Krask with Every Library, the Every Library Institute, Banned Books Week 2025. Thank you for joining us today for a particular conversation about one of the stalwart bookstores in the United States of America, if not the world. One of the trendsetters in the publishing industry that I care about very much, City Lights. We are, during Banned Books Week, very honored to have City Lights as a partner. Both to feature some of their authors. Previously, we've done some great programming as well with them on sharing authors out to either new readers or big conversations. But this week we have a partnership going with City Lights as part of their bookstore itself. It's a real treat for me, professionally and personally, to have some information about Every Library up in their windows and near the cash register. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And part of what we wanted to do today was not only thank them for that in public, but was to also bring forward City Lights' mission, its work, its impact on the world, not just for, back in the 60s, but today. It's a real pleasure for me to bring in Elaine Katzenberger and Paul Yamazaki for this conversation. Elaine is the executive director and publisher of City Lights Books and director of the City Lights Foundation. She's edited numerous prize-winning books of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, and has helped shape the press's distinctive voice as a home for literary excellence and social responsibility. Hi, Elaine.
Hi there.
Hey, thanks for being part of this today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Paul Yamazaki is chief book buyer, has been a bookseller at City Lights since 1970, and has curated shelves for over 40 years, earning some of the highest honors in the field, including the National Book Foundation's Literarian Award. Paul, I got that stuck in my mouth, but I've been to your store. Paul, Elaine, I'll get to talk to you in a second, but Paul, I've been to the store. I've been a shopper there. Well before we had any of these kind of conversations. It's the kind of place that I walk into and I'm delighted to stumble over something. You must have a ball at work every day.
I do have a ball every day. It's been a wonderful kind of like 5 decades of kind of exploration and curiosity and discovery. And the thing that makes me happy is the collaborative effort to bring that joy and discovery to readers.
Thank you for doing that for me as a customer and as somebody who's a literary tourist sometimes. So nice to meet you today, Paul.
No, it's a pleasure, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, just for more than 70 years, City Lights Booksellers and Publishers has stood as one of America's most influential literary and cultural institutions. That's why we're talking today. It's a landmark bookstore and publisher committed to free intellectual inquiry, progressive thinking, and a belief that books can change the world. It was founded in 1953 by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. City Lights was a cornerstone of the Beat generation, the publisher of Ginsberg's Howl, a trailblazer for literature that challenges power and expands consciousness. City Lights has been this revolutionary force in American literary and political life. How do you both think about that as leading an organization that has a heck of a legacy? I mean, Elaine, can you get us started?
The biggest thing I think on my mind always when I make decisions about anything I'm supposed to be making decisions about has to do with that legacy and what it is that we're supposed to be doing with it in any given moment. I've been the director here for about 20 years, but I've been at City Lights for close to 40, and obviously times change, and then in every decade that I've been here, there have been whatever the specific set of circumstances that we might be doing our projects within are specific to that time. So in the time that we find ourselves at any given point, I think that's always the question about, what is it we could do, can do, should do, given what people look for from us. I mean, doing an interview like this, it always brings up a bit of a dilemma for me, because on the one hand, I feel like, hey, we're just a bookstore and we're a publisher. And there are a lot of bookstores and publishers where people are out there working hard, doing what we do, all across the country and around the world. And it feels kind of like hogging the spotlight a little bit sometimes. On the other hand, I also know that there is something special attached to this place that we've managed to keep alive, and that it is beyond those activities. And those activities are how we express what it is we're here to mainly. But it's a dedication to a set of ideals and a set of politics and a set of aesthetics and a commitment on that level that people look to us for. So I feel that very tangible every day in terms of what it is we might be doing at any given. And that, with Paul, I know it's true too. With Paul, his specific sphere is what kind of books are we going to stock the bookstore with and feature in the bookstore. For me, a large part of it is what are we going to publish. But there are also other choices that are involved that we face and talk about. So yeah.
I like the phrase that you used about a commitment to a particular kind of politics or a particular kind of worldview, Elaine. And the average tourist might not know what they're going to get, but anybody who's been paying attention to the literary landscape of the United States does. And I admire that. The interesting part about the history of City Lights is the fact that you have a viewpoint, and yet the First Amendment cases are about the government having a neutrality about that viewpoint and not censoring it. It must be, there's a tension there with every book that you would publish, I would think.
Well, you should ask Paul this question too, but I would say yes and no. I think that our viewpoint, if that's the word to put on it, is clear to us and as important. I mean, it is the most important thing about who we are and what we do, really. So First Amendment rights would theoretically establish a place for us to express that viewpoint. But I don't think we feel it means that we must therefore express all viewpoints. So protecting First Amendment rights in general is definitely something that, I think everybody in the United States and around the world if possible, but here where we actually have an amendment that supposedly guarantees it, it's everybody's responsibility. But it is part of our legacy too. So, and I feel like that's really important for us.
Yeah. So Paul, let me direct that question to you too. As chief book buyer, for City Lights, how do you approach curation in a way that stays true to that founding mission of City Lights Bookstore? And also then, like you got good stuff on the shelf, responding to your readers too.
Well, I think from the very beginning, Lawrence's vision for City Lights was both to be a beacon of possibility. What could a just society look like? And at the same time, to have the tools, books as tools to kind of have a critical response to our current situations, whatever that may be. And so both for libraries and bookstores right now, our role is even more critical in that sense to evaluate that. And I think part of what City Lights' privilege is, being a bookseller in the San Francisco Bay Area, is that we're part of a large ecology of really informed bookstores. Our job at City Lights specifically is to bring forward, and our privilege is to bring forward underrepresented voices, kind of newer publishing houses, newer editors, and that all evolves through conversation with other booksellers, publishers, sales reps, and just and among ourselves.
Yeah, it's a place where literature and politics and community interact and intersect. There's a salon quality here, Paul, to City Lights as a space too. The accidental engagement with a book that you stumble over potentially, but the accidental engagements and the intentional engagements with your neighbors. That doesn't happen in a lot of places that are retail anymore.
Well, I think in the book world, and particularly in independent book selling, that still is really a very, very strong part of what we do. And I think for me personally, and I think for City Lights, it's a pillar of what we do. And I think you used the word, John, salon, and I think that's very apt to the development of City Lights. Before Lawrence and Peter Martin opened City Lights, one of the people who welcomed Lawrence into the San Francisco Bay Area was Kenneth Rexroth, and the salon that he had at his apartment. And it's through Rexroth and those conversations that he meets people like Michael McClure and Philip Lamantia, and we can start going from there.
You know, the polis, you know, that is the heart of the politics.
Yes.
Paul, Elaine, you know, it's under strain right now. Is a polite way to put it. It's a mess out there. You know, we're working right now with libraries and communities that used to have at least some neighborliness, but I'm realizing more and more that a lot of the censorship efforts that are happening are coming from, you know, anti-government, anti-person, anti-tax, but really the anti-person side of it. But the majority population has removed their stay against unseemliness and unneighborliness because they've been persuaded, or they're being persuaded by censorship efforts, that their discomfort is actually more important than somebody else's identity or somebody else's ability to live in a society together. I don't know what it's like right now on the publisher side, Elaine, or on the bookseller side, Paul. If it is as fraught, you know, are people coming through the front door? Are they pushing back on the manuscripts and the books that you're doing? The same way that they're making library less of a polis.
I can speak to this a bit, and probably Paul has things to add too, I'm sure. But so far, City Lights has been very lucky compared to some of our colleagues in the book industry, and certainly compared to our friends in the libraries. But bookstores are experiencing, you know, active actions by people who want to also censor what it is that they do. And, you know, clearly bookstores are one of the places where, you know, it's commerce. So that is the upside of capitalism, I suppose, if there is one, is that there is still a space within which you'd have to declare a book to be obscene. You have to go through each one and do some legal process in order to keep a bookstore or any entity from being able to sell something. And so they can't tell us we can't sell what we want to sell. But the public is being energized to do that at bookstores. So far, we haven't had to sustain that particular kind of attack, but other bookstores have, and it's been physically threatening too, and that's bad, and it's happening everywhere. And ditto with our publishing program. I think because people, I mean, who knows? I don't feel sanguine about this at all. We've taken measures to try to talk to each other about how do we be proactive in planning for anything. It certainly has happened in the past in ways that, people who don't share our political views, and have a platform have directed their audience to harass us in the past. But the tools that they have at their disposal and the license for it is obviously different. So it's a threat, for sure. But in the meantime, I don't think we've changed a thing, about how we're going to approach things, and I don't think we will. I think whatever we can do to remain true to who we are and what we feel we can contribute is what we're going to be doing. And if we can't do that, I don't think we're going to just become some other thing, that wouldn't really solve anything. So.
Yeah. Well, you have several hundred titles in print with a justice and identity and democracy lens to it. Paul, you've got, I don't know how many thousands of titles in the store. What's your experience on the floor?
Well, I'm really not much on the floor these days. I'm working mostly from home since the pandemic. But to acknowledge your earlier question is about what is happening in bookstores across the country. In the Bay Area and San Francisco in particular, we're very fortunate that we live in this very liberal environment where there is a lot of dialogue. But there are booksellers around the country where they're in very hostile environments and continue to stand up and continue to work with their readers, with their public school teachers, with their librarians to fight against all the censorship, all the kind of like overt political hostility. And they're really the true heroes, but it is to such an extent that the American Booksellers Association, our trade organization, runs active workshops for how staffs and managers at bookstores can contend with these various issues, both kind of online and in direct physical confrontation.
I have tremendous respect for our colleagues at the American Booksellers Association and ABFE, the American Booksellers for Free Expression group. In fact, last year we had the pleasure of hosting Philomena Profilon when the anti-censorship manual was published. But we're in coalition with them all the time, and I did not know that they were doing that kind of work for their members. And I think that's really salutatory. That's extraordinary. Paul, you mentioned San Francisco and the terroir there. Every city grows and changes, but City Lights in San Francisco have been deeply intertwined from its founding, City Lights' founding. How has the bookstore's relationship with the city and your neighbors have evolved? And gentrification, there's some technology people hanging out there now, and just cultural changes. What does serving the community look like for you and your booksellers?
It's a discussion that is ongoing, but I think our response was most concisely formulated by Nancy Joyce Peters, who is Elaine's predecessor and a great hero of mine and of City Lights. And what she said is, we started to contend with these issues of gentrification and class change within San Francisco, was that we're more a community of curiosity. We respect our physical community. We love San Francisco, but our real community she had a much more expansive thing that she called community of curiosity. And I think that's, as a bookseller today, I still that is one of my kind of pillars of how we assess and possible titles that we may carry at City Lights.
The idea of a community of curiosity, that's a lovely turn of phrase. And it's evocative of something that I would have hope for. I think I'm an interesting person who does interesting things. I try and follow a line of inquiry once in a while, and I know I'm in my own rut. So coming to a place that has curiosity at its core, and I think about that for my own kids and for people that I interact with. We should be more curious people. That's a beautiful mission.
And it binds us, across so many different boundaries. And so if we as booksellers and as people who present books and authors to a wider public, to do that, it just brings so many different communities into our store. And I think our privilege as booksellers is that we receive the gratitude that goes to authors and to editors and publishers, but the reading public doesn't have access to those, but they have access to us. And so we're very fortunate. And I presume that librarians often feel the same, similarly.
Well, a lot of the author panels that we do over here, Paul, are in order to talk about the culture of reading. The culture of reading, where there's a pipeline or a pathway between a writer through a publisher, either a library or a bookseller to their reader, and that I think is the commonality of this conversation. Whether it's to borrow or to buy, there's the commonality of the conversation is about that culture of reading.
Yes, and I think one of the things that's really important to acknowledge is that accessibility, and one of the things what makes libraries so important is that economic access is becoming more restrictive. Books are getting more expensive, and we do not want to restrict curiosity by economic access, and that's why the libraries continue to, and their importance is increasingly just even on that level. There's many more other levels that it's important.
One thing I'd love to unpack with you sometime is a survey that I helped do many years ago, and I've been trying to repeat it every so often, of what do people do after they get the book out of the library. And there's a certain number of people who go right to the bookstore to buy a copy, and that cuts across genre. Yeah. They buy it for themselves, for their family, to give as a gift. There's a lot of But I also think about that 1,000 books before preschool idea. If a family's got 10, 100 in their home because they can afford it, that's a great personal library. But that other 999 that they might need, it's got to come from somewhere. Otherwise, these kids can't learn to read, so they can read to learn.
Correct.
Yeah. No, the ecosystem here. Elaine, we've talked about the bookstore and the publisher side of things, but there's also the foundation, the City Lights Foundation. I want to check in with you a little bit about that, because the approach that you take with public events, educational programs, outreach, that extension of the mission beyond the bookstore and the publisher. Can you tell folks a little bit more about what the foundation is up to?
Yeah, I mean, right now the foundation is the sponsor for all of our programming. And once in a while, we publish some books in an imprint that is specifically the foundation imprint. And those generally are Bay Area and West Coast related culture and politics. But mostly it's the programming, and it relates to all the things we've been talking about. This idea of a salon, that's really embodied in those events. And that's when the whole community comes together, and it's where we manage to connect readers and writers. And that's where that happens. That what Paul was talking about, how generally people don't have access to that part of how these things are made and how the ideas are, disseminated. So it's exciting for everybody, and it's exciting for us, and it creates a world within itself, within this larger world of what's going on at any given point in the bookstore or with our books that we send out into the world. And it's really generative, and the same way that that what we carry brings different communities, that's what happens with the curation of the events as well. So, on any given night, it could be, a mix of people from different audiences, or it can be really distinct audiences that show up for that. And that's really great to see. So it's an opportunity to extend beyond the activities that we already do and do something else that is more communal and actually does serve in a very tangible way that need of people being together and sharing something. I mean, what you said about people, like the space of a bookstore being a unique kind of thing in our society now, where people actually might commiserate with each other while they're in it, just because it's like, oh, hey, I love that one or whatever. It is true, and that it comes from that curiosity part of us, which is what's nurtured in an environment like this. I mean, really, like if you create a space where you bring out what's best in humans are capable of so many awful, terrible things, like the things that you were referring to, and how that is stoked. But if you stoke the other part, you also get that part, and you get like something more ascendant and humane, and curious and generative. And so the salons amplify or all of the events and the programming, whether they're here. A lot of them are here, some of them are online, and that's been wonderful too, because that started, of course, like everyone during the pandemic. That's how we did it, but we decided to keep it, and it's not always easy to do both at the same time, but it's important because it also speaks to the question of who is our community. Yes, our community is our city and our neighborhood, but it's also international, and it's been international, since the beginning. Lawrence was very much an internationalist, and so being able to attract people from all over to the events and have them share in it too is part of what's really satisfying about it.
There's something very, very important about not the distinctions, but the distinguishments of the bookstore, the publishing house, and the foundation. There's a form follows function issue with how those are built. And the foundation having that structure to allow for that generative activity. And I love that word, generative, because so much of this human interaction right now is being pressured. I mean, there's algorithm-driven advertising. There's algorithm and AI-driven communities that are not of intention, but they're forced into creation by the algorithm. And there's a lot of pressures right now based on corporate, the corporatization of and the consolidation of this sector that a foundation that has that generative approach towards programming and towards human interaction, I think, can help obviate.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we haven't even talked about all that technology stuff except to refer to the state of things. But I mean, absolutely. And a bookstore as a space where serendipity occurs, you know, like you said, you're forced out of your rut because you're just surrounded by a lot of different ideas that call your attention, and something usually happens as a result of that. And so that's true as a shopper. That's true, you know, the beautiful one of the great powerful things about City Lights is our reputation, and what that means is something we can leverage for people who might not know what it is they're even here for. You know, we get a lot of tourists, just like the whole city gets a lot of tourists. And they come here because they are like, well, you know, that's a place you're supposed to visit. But then they come here and look what they find.
Yes.
You know? And look what our little logo means when it's on the spine of a book. It means people's minds open a tiny bit. Be like, well, I've heard about that. And then that's a foot in the door, you know, and that's always been clear. You know, since the day I walked in here and started working at the cash register at the bookstore, and I'm sure Paul has the same experience. It's like, wow, this is a lot of agency to be able to wield in the world. And it comes with a great deal of responsibility, but it's a huge, huge privilege to be able to do these things and to have effects. I mean, we know we're having it. We get told it all the time, which is lovely to have a feedback loop like that for sure.
Paul, I think about the moment of very human interaction when somebody comes into the store and says, "I'm looking for a book with a blue cover." You know, like it's got a blue cover. I heard about it on the radio. You know, like, don't replace that moment with AI, please. You know, I look
exactly.
What are we doing if we're not like having that chat in the stacks?
I think one of the foundations of what we do at City Lights is, and the word that you used, intention, is I think really appropriate. We trust the intention of the reader, that we trust their curiosity, and over 73 years of this trust and of this intentionality on the part of the readers is we just don't have to think in the way that many other booksellers and retailers, we don't have to think about audience. All we have to really focus on is the quality of the book. Is this going to be something that we want on our shelves 5, 10 years, 15 years from now? And our job as booksellers is how to rotate those various titles in. So I'm going to get a little bit geeky here, but at any given time, we have about 25,000 titles in the store, but we have over 200,000 titles of hand-selected titles that, you know, in our database. And it's the job of the booksellers at City Lights to kind of, how do we rotate through those various titles? And I'll get really geeky here, is that 80% of our sales are backlist titles, and 80% of that is like this purchase of a single title and one copy. And so the majority of the things is this whole process of discovery. It's not the face outs, although those are very important, but it is the trusting the reader to carefully browse our shelves and to find that kind of point of discovery and joy for themselves.
Yeah, I don't think that you can do an LLM around that. You know, there's a lived experience to it. And the idea that some point of sale, you know, unmediated, non-human point of sale would be able to do 25,000 current titles, 250,000 you know, things in your backlist, and that single book for that single reader. You know, I'm not throwing any shade on anything that's faced out or anything that's on a table or anything that's the hot new whatever. Yeah. I like reading some stuff as soon as I hear about it. But that
sure, we all do. That
depth, I dig it. All right, team, we are coming up on time, and I want to check in with you a little bit, just for a moment, if I could, about back to that Banned Books Week theme. I mean, the reason that we're here tonight is because we wanted to have a big chat about the culture of reading, but the impediments to it as well. Your experience from where you're sitting, both bookseller, publisher, and foundation, around the censorship pressures that are happening from our different parts of government, we've got a federal framework right now that I think is deleterious to free expression. We've got multiple states, and I live in suburban Chicago. You folks are in San Francisco. I don't want to be a blue island, anymore. And yet we're facing these sorts of curbs on both your basic right to read, but also the identity of the reader finding their own story on the shelf. Where do you think we're going in America? I don't think we're turning a corner yet, but I don't want to be pessimistic on your behalf.
Well, I think, right now, all the elements that you just brought up are absolutely correct. And I think the way that we kind of resist that is to kind of find our allyship, to find to have united fronts and to be able to kind of recognize across, whether we're public school teachers, booksellers, or librarians, that we have so many issues in common that we are much better being in unified awareness of each other's issues, which are basically the same issue, and that we all fight these in our own way and kind of resist them and help each other in our own ways.
Yeah, there's something to be said for solidarity. So,
Yeah.
Elaine, can you take us home?
Oh, if only. If only. All the things that Paul said are true. I think that remaining committed to what it is you really believe in and want to express, and doing that in as robust a way as you can in an environment like this, is each one of us, we have to figure that out personally and institutionally. Working within this structure here, there's still a lot of freedom, but it's not as if I don't think about the threats that could and how they could be leveraged against us, and I don't want to imperil our institution either. Mm-hmm. So those things are real, and we're not, and to Paul's point, we're not alone in dealing with those. And so remaining connected to our colleagues is a big part of it, and that's like colleagues across the industry, but also colleagues in different, colleagues like every library, colleagues like local arts organizations, people who are all struggling now. And finding space to do things that are creative and interesting and fun, and that also, not just, okay, we have to fight, but also we have to make space for more of what we were talking about, so that can continue, that it's not all AI generated. We're going to provide this entertainment to you and you're going to like it because your mind is being trained to like that stuff. And so, making sure that we continue to nurture what it is that's going to get us through, because I don't see too much hope in the near-term future, but I know that humans have gone through eras that have been very dark, and societies have come out the other side, and they've come out with the, human strength inside. That is the good part of who we are. So doing what we can, that's what we have.
Well, I'm glad we're in it together. So, Elaine Katzenberger, Executive Director and Publisher of City Lights Books, and the Director of the City Lights Foundation, Paul Yamazaki, Chief Book Buyer at City Lights. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation today, but also thank you for putting every library up in front of those customers of yours, those tourists who are going to stumble across it, but also in that salon space. It's a delight to me, again, professionally and personally. So.
Well, John, thank you so much for having us here, and particularly for the advocacy work that every library does for libraries across this country. It's really important work. Thank you.
You're very kind to me. Thank you, Paul. All right, team. I'm sorry, Elaine. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for everything you guys do. You guys are winning a lot. I really want to just say it's inspiring for us.
Yeah, we're in it for that ecosystem that you're both talking about. If we can't keep people in touch, if we can't keep readers in touch with their authors through institutions like yours and the institutions that we represent in libraries, this is not a place I want to hang out anymore. We're leaning in because it's the kind of America that we want to see. So
right, and you're absolutely correct. We do not want to be blue islands.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, team. Good to be with you. On Every Library Live, we always wave at the camera, and then I put up the little thing, and then we talk in the green room afterwards. Nice to be